Welcome back to Front Page and AIM Network, your destination for all things AI across India and the world. Before we begin with the headings for the evening, I'd like to tell you that Cypher 2026, India's biggest AI summit, is back in its boldest fashion for the 10th edition, happening in October at KTPO Whitefield in Bengaluru. If you're excited about AI, and if you're even watching AIM Network, which means that you're deep into AI already, and I hope to see you there at the event. Now, here are the headlines for today. India will procure 11 indigenous high-speed amphibious combat boats for Sir Creek and Andaman patrols, capable of 40 plus knots at sea and 15 km per hour on land, closing critical infiltration gaps where conventional boats and vehicles fail. Anthropic has teamed up with Blackstone and Hellman Friedman to launch Ode with Anthropic. It embeds elite engineers inside client offices to wire generative AI into legacy systems. And we have TSMC, who has posted a record 77.4% jump in Q2 net profit to 22 billion. This is its fifth straight record quarter, driven by, of course, AI chip demand, which now comprises 66% of revenue, and it's prompted raising capex guidance to $60 to $64 billion for 2026. And then we have India's Department of Space tightening the exit rules after 100 to 120 scientists, including key Gaganyaan and Chandrayaan 3 personnel, quit in a year as ISRO's low pay struggles to compete with private space startups the government itself helped create. The ePlane company co-founder Professor Satya Chakravarthy will join Front Page to discuss testing their E200X eVTOL prototype, navigating complex aerospace certification, deploying autonomous air ambulances, and building a globally significant aerospace company from India. There's a 96-kilometer stretch of water on India's western border. So where boats run aground, wheeled vehicles get stuck in slush, and smugglers have exploited that gap for decades. Today, India has moved to close it. Yes, the Defense Ministry has issued a request for proposal for nearly a dozen high-speed amphibious combat boats. So, under the Buy Indian category, mandating at least 60% indigenous content. Yep, let that sink in. Look, these are boats that can move seamlessly across water, marshland and firm ground. Most of it will be deployed with the army in Gujarat's Kutch region. The Navy will station the rest at Mumbai and Port Blair. Bids are due within the next 3 months and deliveries within 24 months of contract signing. So why does this particular stretch of border need its own boat? Look, Sir Creek is a 96-kilometer tidal estuary. It's separating Gujarat's Kutch region from Pakistan's Sindh province. A defense source explained the problem quite bluntly. They said that conventional boats run aground in the creeks during low tide, while wheeled vehicles get bogged down in the slush. The result is that the troops patrolling this sector have never had a single platform. A single platform, when I say, is that which can move through mudflats, shallow channels, and dry land alike. That's exactly the gap that these new boats are building to close. Now, let's look at the machine itself. So at sea, these rigid hull boats exceed 40 knots, while carrying 12 fully equipped soldiers and over 1,500 kgs of payload. And they also come fitted with fore and aft weapon mounts. Ballistic protection is included as well. But the real innovation is what happens when the water ends. Because on land, we've got hydraulically operated retractable all-wheel drive, whose legs kick in and letting the boat move at 10 to 15 kilometers per hour, also letting it climb gradients up to 15 degrees. They're also built to be transportable by heavy tank transporters and by Indian Air Force's IL-76 and C-17 aircraft for rapid deployment anywhere they're needed. Essentially, it's just one platform that can operate on 3 different terrains. Now here's the geopolitical aspect making this development quite urgent. India maintains the international boundary runs through the middle of Sir Creek. Pakistan claims the entire waterway up to its eastern bank. There's this unresolved dispute that has also stalled the demarcation of maritime boundary beyond it. And the marshes here, along with the adjoining Harami Nala, have long served as routes for smugglers, drug traffickers, and Pakistani fishing boats. Look, that vulnerability was exposed starkly during the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. This was when terrorists infiltrated by sea after hijacking an Indian fishing trawler. Intelligence assessments last year also flagged that new Pakistani forward posts and bunkers are coming up in the area following Operation Sindoor. Look, security here currently relies on a patchwork. We got BSF floating border outposts, fast patrol boats, all-terrain vehicles, and the specialized Creek crocodile commandos who patrol the Harami Nala on foot and by boat. But here's the thing, none of what I mentioned, none of the existing platforms can transition directly between land and water. That's precisely the capability these new amphibious boats are designed to add. And Sir Creek isn't the only theatre benefiting. For the Navy, this induction strengthens amphibious mobility, especially across the widely dispersed islands of the Andaman and Nicobar Command. It's a theatre that's being steadily reinforced as India's foremost military outpost to monitor China's expanding presence in the Indian Ocean region. So it's just basically one acquisition with two very different frontiers. Now let's zoom out. DRDO has successfully tested its indigenous Pinaka guided rocket, while India has also launched its 15,000 crore rupees stratospheric surveillance program, and now the Army and Navy are inducting indigenous amphibious combat boats. This is across land, air, and now the water's edge. So India keeps closing capability gaps with the technology built at home, and this is also India adapting to terrain that's defeated conventional equipment for decades. Remember, not doing so with imported hardware, but with a Buy Indian mandate built for the specific mud, tide, and the dispute of Sir Creek. Now the question is, can those amphibious boats actually close the infiltration gaps that have haunted the border for decades? Or will the terrain keep finding new ways to outsmart the equipment that's sent to guard it? Let us know what you think in the comments below. This is Front Page by AIM Network. Like, share and subscribe. And always remember to think AI, think AIM. Building a great AI model is a real problem, of course. But getting it to actually run inside a non-technical company full of legacy code, that's been a different problem altogether. And now, the giants are realizing that selling model licenses alone won't win the enterprise market. So Anthropic in May teamed up with private equity giant Blackstone and investment firm Hellman Friedman, and this partnership has now come to life. It's called as Ode with Anthropic. It's a new standalone services firm. The backing of this enterprise also holds other big names such as Goldman Sachs, General Atlantic, Apollo, GIC, and Sequoia Capital round out of the investor group. And that puts Ode's launch valuation at $1.5 billion. So Anthropic, Blackstone, and Hellman and Friedman each put in $300 million, while Goldman Sachs has added another $150 million. Ode's job is to drop forward-deployed engineers straight into corporate offices and rewire how these companies actually work around AI. So Ode was built on the team and technology of an applied AI services startup that Anthropic acquired in May. It's called Fractional AI. That deal also ended Fractional AI's 11-month development partnership with Anthropic's biggest rival, OpenAI. And look, Fractional AI's co-founders now also run the show. Chris Taylor is the CEO and Eddie Siegel is the CTO of Ode. And here's who Ode is actually chasing. It is the under-reserved and underserved middle community banks, regional health systems, and mid-sized manufacturers. These are companies that want AI badly but don't have the engineering bench to build it themselves. Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, and Hellman Friedman are funneling their portfolio companies straight into Ode as a built-in first customer base. Anthropic CEO Krishna Rao put it plainly, saying that the demand for Claude in the enterprise is outrunning any single way of delivering it. Ode is the capacity fix. This puts Anthropic and its Wall Street partners on a collision course with the traditional IT consulting world. Ode is betting on a special forces model where small teams of elite generalists are given the center stage instead of armies of consultants. That's a direct shot at giants like Deloitte and Accenture who've built huge internal teams chasing the same AI services revenue. It also echoes a move from Anthropic's rival. Yeah, OpenAI runs its own commercial services arm, the deployment company. And Ode with Anthropic is proof that the real money in this AI cycle is shifting. And the biggest constraint going forward could be engineers who understand frontier model architecture and independently rebuild a company's operational plumbing. This is happening by pairing up with private equity, and Anthropic is building a capital out of people and enterprise revenue, both. The question I would like you to answer is that, can this boutique enterprise outrun the global workforces of Accenture and Deloitte, or would the talent scarcity hinder Ode to scale into the mid-market? Drop your take in the comments below. This is Front Page by AIM Network. Like, share and subscribe, and always remember to think AI, think AIM. Every time someone questions whether the AI trade is real, TSMC quietly answers with a spreadsheet. Today, the world's most important chip maker just answered again for the 5th quarter in a row. TSMC just posted a 77.4% jump in the second quarter profit to a record Taiwan dollars of 706.56 billion. That's roughly 22 billion US dollars. That figure blew past analyst expectations of 632.6 Taiwanese dollar billion. Revenue climbed up 36% year-on-year to a record 1.27 trillion Taiwanese dollars, which is about 40 billion US dollars. This is TSMC's 5th consecutive quarter of record-breaking profit. Not a one-off beat, but a consistent pattern that's happening across a year. Now, what's driving these large numbers? Of course, we've got the HPC, the AI segment chips, which now make up for 66% of TSMC's total revenue. The CEO put it on the earnings call, saying that the AI megatrend continues to drive the need for more and more compute, which supports the demand for leading-edge silicon. He added that computers had given the company strong demand signals strong enough to force a serious production ramp-up. Gross margins have already reached almost 67% after already hitting their highest level in over 20 years earlier this year. Now here's the number that matters the most for the rest of the year. TSMC raised its 2026 capital expenditure guidance quite sharply from an earlier range of 52 billion US dollars to 56 billion US dollars. And this has been bumped up to a new range of 60 to 64 billion dollars, and the full revenue guidance has jumped as well. The CEO now expects 2026 revenue to grow more than 40% in dollar terms. This is up from a prior forecast of over 30%. The CFO also flagged third quarter revenue between $44.6 billion to anywhere between $45.8 billion. So, while the world's largest chipmaker raises both spending and revenue guidance in the same earnings call, that's about as strong a signal as this industry gives. But it wasn't entirely a clean picture. The CFO also flagged a deterioration in gross margin, tied to an extreme ramp-up of TSMC's advanced 2nm process. Building the industry's most cutting-edge chips isn't cheap, even for a company like TSMC. Operating margin for the third quarter is expected between 56 and 58%. It's quite strong, but not friction-free. And here's why Wall Street watches this print so closely. TSMC is the manufacturer behind every single major AI chip on the planet. Got Nvidia, AMD, Apple, and Broadcom. So when TSMC's revenue hits an all-time high, it's the cleanest signal read on how much AI hardware the world is actually buying. This earnings beat lands at a moment when markets have been nervous about AI overspending. Look, Asian markets sold off hard just weeks ago on exactly that fear. But today's numbers are the opposite kind of signal because TSMC is also pouring 165 billion US dollars into new chip factories in Arizona. It's a long-term bet that the demand keeps coming. This is what real AI demand looks like when it lands on a balance sheet. It's not a forecast and definitely not a slide deck. Look, 5 straight quarters of record profit at the company every major chip designer depends on. The question is TSMC's record quarter proof that the AI boom is durable or just the calm before the correction that everybody keeps warning about? Let us know what you think in the comments below. This is Front Page by AIM Network. Like, share and subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. For decades, ISRO scientists rarely left the company. The prestige of building rockets for the nation was quite the reward itself. But that's changing. The government's response just landed like a headline that nobody expected. So, an internal Department of Space memo dated on July 14th has tightened the exit rules for ISRO's top scientific talent. The memo states that resignation and voluntary retirement requests from Group A scientific technical personnel, especially associated with Gaganyaan and other important missions, may not be accepted as a matter of routine. Let that sink in. So, center directors who since 2020 could approve these exits directly have now had that authority stripped away. Every resignation must go up to the department itself for the final call. So, what exactly triggered this? Sources put the number at 100 to 120 scientists walking out in the past year alone. That's around 80 from the U.R. Rao Satellite Center, at least 20 from the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, which is ISRO's largest, with over 4,570 employees. These weren't just junior staff. LVM-3 project director Victor Joseph, the man overseeing the rocket meant to launch Gaganyaan's crew module, and the SpaceDex director, and Aditya Ralapalli, who led the simulation team of generating 25 terabytes of data, which validated Chandrayaan 3's moon landing sequence, are all the people who leave and who are leaving that aren't easy to replace. They're the ones holding mission-specific knowledge that nobody else has. Now, here's the uncomfortable number underneath all of this. An entry-level ISRO scientist earns roughly 72,000 rupees a month in hand, but a senior scientist with 20 years of experience tops out around 2 lakh rupees with all the allowances included. Compare that to Skyroot's founders. They are engineers who left ISRO back in 2018. They now hold a combined stake worth 2,440 crore rupees inside a company valued over $1 billion. So, startup employees with equity can earn more from a single IPO or a buyout. It's more than what ISRO pays across an entire career. And here's what makes this memo land differently. Look, India opened up space to private companies back in 2020, and the government-funded startups gave them access to ISRO's own infrastructure and transferred SSLV rocket technology directly to HAL. Private space companies went from just 11 in 2019 to more than 400 by 2024. And space startup funding also crossed $147 million in FY 2025 to 2026 alone. So the same government that built that competing market, funded it, and celebrated it is now issuing a memo asking scientists to not leave for it. A cadre review added 460 new posts recently, but new positions don't close a pay gap this wide. And this isn't happening in isolation. ISRO currently has roughly 1,050 scientific and administrative vacancies. These are vacancies it hasn't been able to fill fast enough. And the agency has also had a rough year operationally. Both PSLV C61 and PSLV C62 suffered mid-flight failures between May 2025 and January 2026. So to date, ISRO has completed just one launch attempt in all of 2026 and it has failed. Chairman V. Narayanan struck a measured tone publicly. Yes, a lot of people go, but that's part of every organization. If someone is still going, someone else will take the responsibility by taking care of it. But insiders describe something more anxious underneath that calm. A workforce watching the state's own strategic pivot towards private players and wondering where their own careers actually lead. This is what happens when a state agency creates its own private competition without matching what that competition pays. So, tightening exit rules can slow the bleeding, but it doesn't fix why people are leaving in the first place. The question is, will ISRO actually address the pay gap driving the exodus, or will administrative restrictions just delay an exit that better compensation could actually have prevented? Let us know in the comments below, of course, what you think. This is Front Page by AIM Network. Like, share and subscribe, and always remember to think AI, think AIM.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ML file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Pi project created. There is requirement, and this is the environment. So this is the app where you have a Pi cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker, and these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ML file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Pi project created. There is requirement, and this is the environment. So just this is the app where you have a Pi cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker. And these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
Professor Satya Chakravarthy recently walked into Rajiv Gandhi Bhavan in New Delhi, the Ministry of Civil Aviation headquarters, and presented a full-scale Indian eVTOL aircraft to Civil Aviation Minister Ram Mohan Naidu. Not a model, sir. Not a render, a full-scale prototype built by 5 engineers who started in an IIT Madras lab in 2019. Joby Aviation has raised over $2 billion. Archer Aviation raised $1.1 billion. The ePlane company built India's first full-scale eVTOL on $21 million. The E200X needs an 8-meter by 10-meter landing space, a large rooftop maybe. India has recorded 172,890 road accident fatalities in 2023. That's quite depressing. An aircraft that can land on a rooftop and reach a patient before an ambulance clears the traffic is, well, truly not a luxury product anymore. Professor Satya Chakravarthy is founder and CEO of the ePlane company, and he is joining me exclusively, which I believe seems to be a fabulously interesting conversation ahead. Welcome to Front Page, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing fine.
True honor and pleasure to have you with us. Let's start there. Yeah, the Civil Aviation Minister, Ram Mohan Naidu, at the Ministry of Civil Aviation headquarters in Delhi. So walk us through that meeting. And what was the one question from the government side that, well, kind of surprised you the most, if it did?
Oh yeah, the minister was super excited, first of all, to see what we have been doing. I think he's been looking at what we have been doing all the time. The moment we started the conversation, he said, "You have been creating a lot of buzz," and my response was, "We are going to be creating more buzz."
Nice, nice.
And then I walked him through the progress that we have been posting and the steps that we will be taking towards commercialization, the timeline through which we do this,
Nice.
how the DGCA has been supporting on the whole, and how together with the DGCA, it's possible for us to actually work on the ecosystem building and so on. And we also actually discussed with them our future plans of developing even larger aircraft and all those things. So the minister was actually extremely attentive, and he was pausing to ask lots of questions. It was extremely conversational.
Very nice.
Yeah, very informal. We invited them to actually come and visit our facility that we had inaugurated about 6 months ago.
And rightly so.
The 60,000 square feet facility, and we are planning to expand it to also include India's first vertiport in the campus very soon, in the next couple of months. But the minister actually can't wait. So there's a parliament session that's actually coming up, and he kind of stood up and said that, well, you may be surprised, Ramay, I could even find time to come even during the parliamentary session. Nice. I told him, please surprise me, Minister.
And that was the wonderful surprise that we were looking at. Fabulous. Yeah. Fabulous. What inspired this? I want to understand that first, sir. The fact that, what got you to probably think on the lines of an eVTOL aircraft? 2019, as I had mentioned earlier, it's been almost 7 odd years. But what motivated the decision to kind of, go into this entire mechanism and an understanding?
Yeah, it actually happened in 2 steps. Back in 2016, I was busy establishing the world's largest academic combustion research center at IIT Madras, as well as we were partnering with IISc to do this together with the DST support. And I was also actually hemming the Center for Propulsion Technology for DRDO, largely based on combustion work and so on. But the winds of change were actually already there for all of us to see, going away from combustion in multiple ways. One is the greenhouse gas emissions leading to climate change and all of that kinds of stuff. And the second one is to actually clamor for sustainability, have electric mobility and all of those things. So I was asking to myself, what are the change that aviation should actually usher in this context? And that actually opened my eyes to what's possible with electric for aircraft. Original penchant was to actually think about like a conventional takeoff and landing electric aircraft.
Right. And
I don't realize that it's not going too far. It probably has like a max range of about 200 kilometers. And we don't really have airports and runways that are like so close to each other, and there is hardly much of a commercial possibility of within 200 kilometers, right? So I mean, people need to fly within 200 kilometers. They'll probably drive.
Yes.
Right. So that's when I hit upon the next step, which is to be necessitated to look at an eVTOL. And then suddenly realized that pretty much all the eVTOL companies might have actually gone through this revelation in their minds. But the moment you actually say, hey, this is what technologically is possible, that's not what matters. What matters is what is the problem that you're trying to solve.
Fair enough.
And do we have a problem at hand, or am I actually looking for a nail with a hammer in the hand? Right. So the answer is, and this is where actually studying Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma came in very handy. He basically said that all disruptions, disruptive innovations, disruptive technologies always actually start with inferior performance.
Fair.
And for that reason, they need to actually explore newer markets from where they will have to grow to challenge the current incumbents.
Sure.
And so this was actually a template, and he's given like about 20, 30 examples over a 200-year period on all kinds of products. This is played out over and over again. And in fact, the tagline of the book is what makes large companies fail, or something like that, right? So this is very, very interesting. I believed that if I were to actually get into the eVTOLs and grow from there there is a chance that we can actually challenge the current incumbents in the aviation field, which is like Boeing, Airbus, and so on over time, with
Fabulous.
a electric or a hybrid electric variant that could actually challenge the current status quo on civil aviation itself. So this was actually a huge motivation for me to get into eVTOLs.
It's fabulous, the fact that the base thought or the root thought that you just described, Professor, is so aspirational. Honestly, sky was probably never the limit for you. Which brings you to this then. Joby Aviation, right? $2 billion have been raised. Archer Aviation, $1.1 billion. ePlane is $21 million total. Now, is capital efficiency a competitive advantage, or do you feel a constraint you're building around?
The latter is actually the fact of the matter on the floor as we speak today, which is a capital efficiency is actually a must for what we do in India, because the availability of capital is also scarce. And scarcity of capital actually makes the Indian brain work a lot more actively when compared to when you had like a lot of money available to you. And
you wanted to use the word jugaad, right, for a second?
No, this is not jugaad.
Okay.
Right? We have to actually do it right. So just look at what ISRO did, right, with the kind of capital efficiency that they displayed, even for a governmentally funded. And I know a lot of ISRO scientists very personally. I've interacted with them over the last 30 years.
Right.
We asked the question, how are you able to pull it off, time and time again with like consecutive PSLV successes, all of that stuff. And I've actually seen those SLV and ASLV failures, and a lot of people around now are actually too young to know that those things happened in the past. And if you actually go back and see how they had failed, they are actually what I would call as well-crafted failures. So the failures
Very
are
well put.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So failures are stepping stones to successes, as they say, but that's not actually dressing it up. You got to be less averse to failure and actually plant a failure to learn. And that's what actually ISRO did, right? I'd say kind of like experimental developments in sense, right? And that actually paved the way for like the PSLV to, be able to take us to the moon or Mars for like much less than what a Hollywood movie takes and all of those things. And that's simply because they are actually cash-strapped. I mean, their budgets are actually much smaller when compared to NASA, where NASA can actually test about hundreds of flights. These guys actually can test only 3 flights. And so on. And that exactly is the same case for Indian deep tech startups too. And that essentially means that we have to really squeeze our brains to figure out like how much can I pack into one test where I can test all the things that I can independently test in this test. And I don't have the freedom to do like about 10 tests or 20 tests. I have only 3 tests to do.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So this is exactly how we work. But having said that, in the long term, for a commercial venture, a frugality with which we develop things will stand us in good stead in reaching our break-even points much, much quicker and getting a rate of return much, much quicker for the investments made and so on, right? And the old school business calculations actually never really stopped from working, right? So if you take less money, you can actually pay that back much sooner. That's the idea. Yeah, of course. Yes.
But Professor, it's very interesting that you touched upon the scarcity of funds, especially when it came to deep tech, and that's a true hardcore reality. And I remember when I had a conversation with Dr. Kamakoti. By the way, he's an institution in himself, and the fact that the gentleman is brilliant. And I remember 2 things that happened when I was having that conversation. I asked him why, and I would like to ask you the same. IIT Madras does a lot of work as far as deep tech is concerned, and we are very proud of it. But why is there not a significant amount of capital which is being poured into deep tech? That's one, patient capital. Second, the fact that what I remember Dr. Kamakoti saying is the fact that the entire ecosystem needs to thrive even further. But is it because of the fact that there's a lack of capital, and maybe that is what is demotivating a lot of startups to come into the space?
Well, I'll pick up the question at the last part of what you said and then work backwards.
Fair.
What I'm actually astounded by is a lot of youngsters and middle-aged people who actually jump into deep tech and get seed funded and therefore get intoxicated to pursue that path without knowing how it's actually a bed of thorns for us to raise funds further and persevere and all of those things. I think it's probably like cultural that Indian deep tech actually has been thriving much better than even the rest of the world in terms of like percentage of startups that are deep tech among all the startups and so on. So there is a general affinity for an Indian to actually get into like a deep tech startup much more than what I would expect in other parts of the world, in my view. But that said, the capital scarcity actually has been getting better, is improving in the sense that we don't really have that much of a scarcity as it was maybe about 8 years back. Right. So when we started, for example, in 2018, 2019, with multiple startups that I was part of at the time, including the ePlane, there were only about maybe one or two funds that would actually come forth to fund what looked like lavish ideas, grandiose plans, moonshots, as they would call it, and all that stuff. Patient capital was definitely scarce, but it's actually getting much, much better over the last few years. Aether has actually shown by going IPO, Idea Forge that has gone IPO, and all that stuff, right? So, which essentially means that there is a pathway that people are beginning to see. And we are also beginning to see that people who have actually been trading in public markets, very interesting phenomenon, demographic phenomenon, the sons of those people, right, sons and daughters, right, they are actually bored of the regular stock market play, and they want to now actually look for they are actually now trying to bet on multiples of returns. Like, for example, if we can actually think about like a 3x return in about 5 years, or a 10x return in about 7 years, or something of that sort. That's actually a much, much better growth path for investments when compared to like a 27% CAGR growth rates that you can see in like mature companies in the stock market and stuff, right? So while their parents were actually growing their wealth in a very safe manner, now there is some amount of wealth in the family that can actually be sort of splurged. And the interesting thing about Indian deep tech is that we are not just frugal, but also actually extremely responsible.
Yes, that's true.
The number of deep tech startups falling down like 9 pins is actually much, much rare when compared to the kind of view that we have, that if you fund 10 startups, only one will prevail and the other ones will actually fall down, and you make money with that one startup and so on, right? So that doesn't happen with deep tech. It just requires patient capital there. And that patient capital is improving much, much more so in the last less than 6 months, when the government has actually started putting in money.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Do you feel that the government needs to push a lot more?
Yeah, I'm sorry?
Do you feel that the government needs to probably push a lot more, needs to probably get a lot more active as far as the ecosystem is concerned?
Well, the government actually kind of started smelling the whiff of change in this direction maybe about 2 or 3 years back. And I have been part of conversations with the government on deep tech policy to be evolved, the space tech policy. All of those things have actually happened through the earlier part of this decade, which has now matured to what is now the RDIF, the Research Development Innovation Fund. That's
also the private sector opening up into this ecosystem. I think that was a wonderful change that the government brought about.
In fact, the government is now, with the RDIF, they're actually forcing the private sector to open up their purses even more. Because they are basically saying that I will actually give you 50%, you actually show 50%. Right, so the government is actually acting like a true businessman. Right? So they're basically saying, we are here to invest, and we want our private people to actually co-invest. Right. So this is actually about building India one brick at a time together. All of us actually have to chip in. That's the idea.
I agree. Yeah. I agree there. And the fact that this kind of a conversation needs to happen a lot more, sir. It needs to be front and center constantly, I feel. When it comes to deep tech, when it comes to space tech, I think it needs to happen. And we need to embrace the fact, as you mentioned, that, probably the demographic, the population now is far more not risk averse, which is a good thing, which I think is a great thing.
Absolutely. That's right.
Which brings me back to, of course, the moment where I would want to probably bring that smile on your face when I'm going to walk you through this. 5 engineers, synergistic lift patent in 8 countries, India's first private DGCA design organization approval for an electric aircraft. Honestly speaking, I want you to obviously absorb that moment, because brilliant accomplishment. What nearly, by the way, was the challenge, the program, and what kept it going? Because I'm sure there must have been some roadblocks which would have come along the way.
Right. So, yeah, there have been multiple roadblocks. But the most important thing that I would like to highlight is for someone to actually think about a product market fit early on. Regardless of whether they're actually doing deep tech or shallow tech or whatever that is, it's entrepreneurship actually has its fundamentals, right?
Sure.
And it is actually very business oriented. We have to ask the question, who cares about what you're building?
Yeah.
And what's the kind of money they're willing to put on the table, and how many such people exist, and what is the market size in dollar terms or rupee terms? And is it actually worth chasing after? And what are the kind of investments that we're going to clock for getting there? And will there be a return on investment? So all of these kinds of things have to actually start in the back of your head early on for a 7 to 8 year run.
Agreed.
And that's not so easy for a lot of people to do, right? They're just stepping into something they have no idea about, and how much it's going to cost and all of those things. So the best way to think about it is to actually target a large TAM market, right? So whatever actually is a pain point for a large number of people for which they put a significant value on the table is something that's worth going after, because your cost could escalate when compared to what you can estimate right at the beginning. But they always have a North Star saying that, hey, I'm actually after a big market, so it doesn't matter, right? I can actually try to convince investors to put in more and more money as it may require, but I'm actually a bellwether product that's going to prevail. Right, that conviction, that market conviction is actually super important. From there, you have to actually figure out what is the product that will fit the market. And the second thing that you have to then ask is there any tech that is lacking in this that actually should enable this product market fit? Right. So less abstraction. What I would like to say is, in this case, we were actually thinking about a taxi, and we have not really seen planes behave like taxis in the way of getting to where you are and taking you to where you want to go at the time that you want. And on-demand transportation in the city, where it can actually land on your rooftop and take you to the destination rooftop, and so on, right? So that means the typical distances that we're talking about are like less than 20 kilometers, where people get in traffic for a disproportionately longer amount of time. And also,
sir, in Bengaluru, I'll reduce it. I'll bring it down to 4 kilometers.
I know, right? So that's exactly the point. Planes don't travel 4 kilometers, 20 kilometers, and so on. They are actually used to, flying like hundreds of kilometers. Right. So in a lot of ways, we are actually now trying to bring a form factor of an aircraft to doing something that a taxi has to do. Right. And we thought through this early on and asked the question, what does it take for a very short, small form factor plane to do multiple short trips before you have a downtime charging? And it has to be electric for the simple reason that the maintenance and operating costs, as well as the capex, developing it out of India and producing it out of India, all of these things actually line up more towards an electric rather than a hybrid or a combustion plane, which guzzles a lot of money today, like a helicopter does.
Commercial viability, very simple, sir. Electric makes sense.
Yeah, all of that put together, we actually clocked the IP that you referred to, and then subsequently we went to DGCA. DGCA guided us, saying that apply for the design organization approval. They were extremely supportive and cooperative. Got it in about 5 to 6 months, or less than 5 months actually, right? And we have, so DGCA actually has this half-yearly audit for keeping the DOE alive, the design organization approval alive, and we go through all of those things, which has been extremely useful because we kind of get the discipline and the rigor within the organization to meet up to those standards. And then we have actually been the only one to go through a certification pathway for our propeller as well as our aircraft, and learn what does it take to actually be on the certification pathway. What are the certification basis that we have to target, whether it's a European basis or is it a US basis? The Indian basis cannot actually be comparable to the European or US. So suddenly we just opened up, a lot of international thinking, because aviation is actually international.
Yes.
Right. So there is no jugaad that we can do here. Right. So it has to actually meet up to global standards. The only thing that we have going for us is the Indian brains at an Indian cost, which is actually extremely affordable. That's what we have seen that actually repeated over and over again in lots of things, right? Whether we build bridges or like the UPI moment and all that stuff, right? So everything is actually extremely frugal. That's actually our DNA. Yeah.
Wonderful. Professor, I have to ask you this. I mean, just a little follow-up on what we just discussed. You talked about a very long vision, which is obviously the fundamentals of being an entrepreneur, which is wonderful. and also the market aspect. But, one thing came to my mind. I was just connecting the dots because you were talking about earlier in terms of how you want to go ahead and crack the market where, there's a Boeing, etc., all of that. So competition from one point also has an impact on the kind of product, you mentioned it, but also the timeline, right?
Yeah.
So you're dealing with a lot of companies with probably a huge amount of capital and you're contesting with them. So the distinction in your product with that timeline horizon in mind is very important because it's going to take you 5 years, 6 years probably to develop it, which in the case has been the case. In the meantime, if somebody else develops it, then you lose out on your entire effort. Was that also a big challenge?
Indeed. So we need to be cognizant of all of these things that are happening and where are we with respect to the rest of the world and how are they racing past us versus how can we actually race past them?
Right.
If that's possible and all that stuff, right? There are definitely the possibilities of like a David versus a Goliath story to happen or a hare versus a tortoise story to happen and so on. And as an entrepreneur, we wake up on the right side of the bed all the time, thinking positive,
right.
saying that, hey, why can't I actually pull off this miracle? Right. And then so on. So, and always look for, so it's kind of like a concerted effort. So we actually, once you believe that this miracle can happen, you start thinking about the mechanics of the miracle,
sure.
right? What are all the nuts and bolts of how is this miracle can actually happen? And every step of the way, am I actually inching towards this miracle to happen?
So you're manifesting it in a way.
Yeah, in some sense. I mean, I don't want to actually get into all the spiritual stuff.
Fair
and
enough.
So on. But it's important for us to actually think very rationally about it.
Sure.
Right? Not just manifesting or whatever, right? Think rationally about it. First of all, there is a gut feel. We start with saying that there is a miracle that can happen, but what the mechanics of the miracle, right? And every step of the way, are we actually inching towards it? And keep checking yourself against this, right? So what we find is the certification pathway for these big money guzzlers turns out to be a little bit more difficult when compared to what it is for us, because of the choice of the architecture that we have made on the aircraft, which is like a lift plus cruise with sufficient redundancies that allows for enough safety margins and so on. So we, as well as our regulator, actually are convinced that we have a straight path certification, which seems to be elusive for the competitors. So
fair enough.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say, right? So what we know from some people that have access to how that market works in the other part of the world versus how we work is the competitors that we're talking about, investors did not even ask them, what's your commercial model? They were like, oh, you're building a plane? Fine, we can actually give you money. Right? It doesn't happen in this part of the world.
It doesn't.
Right? Regardless of whether you build a plane or whether you build a rocket or whether you build a whatever, right? They actually ask you, hey, what is the return on investment? Okay. And what is your unit economics? And how is it all going to stack up? Right? How are we going to actually pay back? True. And what is the payback period? So all of these hard, tough questions are asked. So you quickly come down grounded and say, forget out having your heads in the clouds and dreaming all the time. Just answer these very hard questions, and which also means that every step of the way we make choices of our engineering architecture that can get certified quickly, easily, and so on. So there are multiple reasons for us to believe that we could prevail in this market when compared to money guzzlers. Just because you have money doesn't mean that you actually make the right choices. You could actually end up making wrong choices because you have money.
Fair point. But the fact that, I have to say this and then congratulate you. You might not have your head in the clouds, but trust me, sir, what you've created does. And that's fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, the E200X needs only about an 8 meter by 10 meter landing space, rooftop to rooftop operations, which we just kind of discussed in brief. I'd like you to elaborate it. Most global eVTOL programs require infrastructure. India does not have, right? Now, what did designing for what India already has force you to, for example, get it right?
Yeah. So India is actually a very nice laboratory, if I will, because
I love the way you put that across, but that's true. It is true.
I'll tell you why, right? So increasingly where India is now actually kind of getting to becoming more upper middle class-ish, right? Lots of people have actually gone middle class from poverty. A lot of middle class people are becoming upper middle class. Fair. Right? All that stuff, right? So what does it mean? What it means that what we designed for India actually can work very well in the world, right? And in this particular case, the example that you're talking about, a helipad is a helipad. It's actually having universal regulations applicable everywhere, right? DGCA adopts the same regulations for a helipad as the FAA does, and so on.
Sure.
So we are able to show that we can actually land on existing helipads or spaces that are even smaller than an existing helipad. We have the ability to be able to prevail across the world because we are actually prevailing in India. So targeting an Indian market is actually a very good thing for the global players because if you specifically look at aviation, India is actually the fastest growing aviation market consistently for about 15 years now. Right? Indian airlines are the ones that are actually placing the largest orders for aircraft, right? If you now scale that down to what we are trying to do, and the other end of the spectrum for us is actually cars. And today, for example, Chennai makes more cars than Detroit. And Chennai used to actually fashionably call itself as the Detroit of India.
Right.
Where now maybe Detroit should actually call itself the US. Right. And if you now look at so many cars that are in the market, there is export potential for the cars that are actually being made in India to Europe and so on. We are actually targeting the global market when compared to just specifically thinking about India. But India is a good laboratory for us to start with because increasingly I'm using this phrase very commonly, what's good for India is good for the world.
No, I see your point there. Because of the sheer variation, the mercurial landscape that we are constantly trying to traverse. So I see your point.
So,
sorry, you were saying.
So I mean, I'm like working for an Indian context, like the rooftops and all that stuff, essentially is making us feel good for being fit for the global market. That's a point I'm trying to make. Yeah.
Fair enough. Professor, what are your thoughts very quickly as far as the aviation industry in India is concerned? Because, well, it has seen its bunch of challenges over the last decade or so, etc. And with what you're trying to obviously crack open, do you feel that it'll be a great fit, given the fact that probably, a lot of the airlines over the last maybe about 10, 15 years have genuinely gone through a troubled situation?
Yeah. So we got to understand the economics of aviation largely, right? So the starting point is actually the cost of the plane.
Right.
And when we are now actually talking about like an Airbus or a Boeing aircraft that has to be imported, they actually cost a bomb. And then you now have lessors with which you actually work with leasing options like wet lease versus a dry lease and all of those kinds of things. And if you're not able to actually run your airline to a fine metal like what Indigo does, for example, is actually a very good textbook example now of how to run an airline profitably, because there aren't too many of them that actually have successfully done so. So you need to actually have every little thing that you actually shave off, because the starting point is actually against you. You're actually having to import these very, very expensive aircraft. So I believe as a technologist, as a person who is actually in this field, that problem will be solved if we actually are able to make our own planes. For the aviation market. And that's one of the major conversations that I had with the Honorable Minister last night. And that's something that we should actually be going towards. But that said, what we are doing actually is more comparable to cars when compared to aviation.
Agreed.
Where it actually is comparable to aviation is the safety standards, because anything that takes off the ground has to safely return back to ground. And we have this dictum in aviation: takeoff is optional, landing is mandatory.
True.
Right. So we have to actually deal with aviation safety standards, but at an automotive scale.
Yeah.
So if an automotive actually got standard, you're still on ground, right?
Agree.
And probably just want to pray to all the gods to be able to just pull off the road to the corner, like, to the curb. But here, it's actually much, much more than that, right? This is a new industry that we are actually trying to spawn that straddles between automobiles and aviation.
Fair enough.
So there isn't actually much of a comparison with either of them, but you can actually see shades of both of them actually kind of falling into this.
And yes, it seems like a wonderful little, bridge between both the industries, as you had elaborated upon. But great, the fact that, the Honorable Minister has started to think on the lines of us going ahead and manufacturing our own planes. That is encouraging. Safety is something that you just spoke about, and here is obviously a very disturbing figure. India recorded, as I had mentioned earlier, Professor, 172,890 road accident fatalities, and this was in 2023. I'm sure now might have gone up given the density of traffic and all of that. Now, the E200X single airframe supports passenger and cargo and air ambulance missions. That I would like to underline.
Yeah.
Now, why is an air ambulance the first commercially viable use case, according to you? And what does the economics look like compared to, let's say, a passenger air taxi?
Right. Okay. The last bit is something where you're actually making apples to oranges comparisons, because the air ambulance unit economics does not exactly directly compare with an air taxi. Right. But that said, the air ambulance actually remains our go-to-market strategy for the simple reason that we have the ability to modulate the demand much better with an air ambulance. Fortunately, there are less number of road ambulances than taxis on the road.
Right.
Right. And thankfully so. We probably need a bit more of the road ambulances, but not necessarily as the number of taxis.
Sure.
So the question that we would ask is, unlike a Uber, which is actually basically a software company dishing out one software for the passenger and another software for the driver and just putting them together, right? That's what they do.
Right.
The asset actually is brought by the driver. They don't really have to spend any money on the asset. But in this particular case, the asset actually has to be built and has to be owned and has to be operated upon. Right. So who is going to bell the cat over there is a question. And considering that, an air ambulance makes more sense for us to actually get into the market with, simply because the rate of production initially will actually be slow. And for us to be able to get to like the thousands of aircraft per year kind of productions that is required for that taxi will happen a little later. So if I were to launch an air taxi service, I mean, not necessarily me, but let's say an air taxi service was actually launched, right, with about 5 planes in Bangalore, it will make headlines for about 1 or 2 days, but it will not scratch the demand at all, right?
True.
And people will actually get disillusioned about it pretty soon.
Right.
So unless they actually have like about some 20, 30 planes that are available for Bangalore and then scales up to about 100 to 500 over the next few years kind of thing, I will not be able to actually operate a credible air taxi service. But a 4 to 5 air ambulances per city is actually a decent number. That's actually the reason why we want to go for an air ambulance. The second thing is the economics, right? Because we're actually doing at the level of about 4 or 5 ambulances per city to begin with, the cost of production actually remains high, and therefore the payback period on that actually remains large, unless you're able to charge more. And an air ambulance allows us to charge more because it's actually life-saving, it's time critical. Sure. And the numbers that you talked about, the fatalities and all that stuff, 65 to 75% of that is primarily because patients are not able to get to the hospital in the golden hour. Yeah. Right. And that's the problem that we are trying to address. And it's a very humanitarian problem that we are actually so glad we can be part of. And we hope that will actually save lots of lives. And people will be willing to put in more money for this than what they would pay for a taxi. And that's where the apples to oranges
any day,
that I was talking about. But the more interesting thing is the comparison actually is what does today's air ambulance cost versus what we can actually end up charging. Correct? And today's air ambulances are actually sky high prices, like about 1 lakh, 1.5 lakhs, 2 lakhs, the kind of prices. Nobody takes an air ambulance, right? And when we are able to bring this down to something like about a 15,000 or a 20,000.
Wow, that is
right. And keep in mind that an air ambulance trip is always empty one way to pick up the patient. Right. So, and the patient has to actually pay for both the trips, and therefore the price is high. Right. But there are insurance companies that are now looking at covering an air ambulance if it is within this about 15,000, 20,000 kind of
which is price, a breath of fresh air, sir.
And imagine you have a health insurance policy, and all you have to do is to pay, I don't know, I'm just guessing, something like about 100 to 500 rupees extra per year, so that you will actually have an additional coverage of a credible service.
Anyone would do it, sir.
Right. And this is actually there for the asking, and that will actually suddenly open up the air ambulance market significantly.
True.
Right. And so on. So these are the contours of how we think the air ambulance will first get into the market versus The next step would actually be the air taxis. As and when we have about 5-6 air ambulances per city, we can actually think about like the next 10 units of aircraft could then be actually dedicated to their taxis and so on. But the mix of air ambulances to air taxis will shift more decisively towards air taxis in the tens or hundreds over the next few years from the initial period. And then the cost of air taxis will become more affordable, comparable to what you pay for an Uber price. Yeah.
Fair enough. Very quickly, sir, before I get into the specific of things, I would like to request you, if you could be kind enough, because this is brilliant, encouraging the market that you're hitting at, the fact that it's a humanitarian aspect, it's going to change lives in so many ways, save lives in so many ways. What is the kind of timeline that one is looking at, for example, for it to get let's go commercial? 1, 2, what are the kind of specifics, for example, one is looking at? In terms of number of people, for example, or how many people can accompany the patient, etc. I'd love for you to probably share those details because I'm very sure people are curious.
Yeah. So the timeline that we're looking at for the air ambulance to hit the market is somewhere in the first half of 2028.
Okay.
Right. If you're lucky, it could be the first quarter. If you're not so lucky, it could be second quarter. Hopefully, it will not get delayed beyond that point.
Okay.
Let's say thereabouts. Right.
Okay.
The first half is actually a fairly safe thing to bet on at the moment. Right? And that requires us to actually go through the hoops on certification with a conforming prototype and another one to back it up. And plot the flight hours that are required, do all the ground tests of all the subsystems and systems and components and all of those things, show all of them as certification artifacts, document them, right? The entire 9 yards is something that we will have to go through in the next 1.5 years to 2.
By the way, just very quickly, I want to ask you this. Is the DGCA certification milestone the hardest part of all of this?
Certification is the hardest. It's not necessarily DGCA.
Okay.
All right.
Propeller certification?
Propeller certification, we believe, can actually be clocked sooner than that, like about within the next 6 months or so.
Fabulous.
Is what we think. But that's actually a prerequisite for us to actually get through the aircraft certification itself and so on.
Right.
Being hard is actually something that does not deter me. Right. I've been doing things that are hard progressively, harder and harder through my life. So I'm kind of like this maniac who is like, okay, what are the next hardest thing?
Nice.
and then right. So that's not the big problem. To answer the next question that you asked, currently, if you look at the practice abroad, they don't actually take any of the relatives in the ambulance.
Yes.
Right. In the road ambulance.
Yes.
Typically say, leave the patient to us, we will take them. So we have a pilot, a patient, and a paramedic that can actually be fitted into this.
Oh, wow.
If we actually expand the capacity of the air ambulance simply because we are able to shave weight of the structure or some other things and add to the payload, it'll actually be a doctor. It'll still not be a relative, right? So a doctor actually accompany what's a flying ICU. And we want to get to the point of like a flying ICU, even if it's actually only going to be a 10-minute flight or a 15-minute flight, right? And
AI prototypes are everywhere. but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ml file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Pi project created. There is requirement, and this is the environment. So this is the app where you have a Pi cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker. And these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ML file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Pi project created. There is requirement. And this is the environment. So this is the app where you have a Pi cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker. And these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. I'm Antara and you're watching Point Break. I want to start with a little food for thought. We often joke that life runs on 3 things: roti, kapda, makan, which roughly translates to food, clothing, and shelter. But from where we are standing right now, at this point, another aspect seems absolutely impossible to ignore. And of course, you've guessed it right, it is AI. You need an answer, you ask AI. You need to write an email, you ask AI. You need to learn a new skill, you need to create a presentation, generate an image, debug code, plan a trip, summarize a document, you ask AI. You name it, it's got it. India, in fact, has emerged as one of the world's most enthusiastic adopters of artificial intelligence. Nearly 87% of Indian enterprises now use AI in some form or the other, while more than half have embedded it directly into their core business processes. It, of course, is AI Appreciation Day, and I want to start with two things that people said this week, and honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. One, of course, is what Demis Hassabis said. Demis Hassabis, of course, the CEO of Google DeepMind, he published an essay saying, we may be standing in the foothills of singularity, that AGI could be years away, that AI is not like the internet or the smartphone. It is more like the discovery of electricity or fire. And he didn't stutter when he said that this is humanity's most important technological moment. But appreciation without responsibility could be dangerous. Then came in Paras Chopra of Loss Funk, who pushed back. He said, comparing artificial intelligence to electricity is apples to oranges. Electricity transformed society, but people had to learn how to use it separately. Artificial intelligence is different because it can actively help you learn how to use AI itself. The technology by itself is accelerating its own adoption. The compounding is different this time, which brings us back to AI Appreciation Day. Should we be celebrating AI, or should we be using this moment to really ask whether we are deploying artificial intelligence wisely or not? I'm Antara. This is Point Break. Let's get right into it. Today, of course, I have with me two guests from two different vantage points. My first guest is Avi Chudasama, who is the co-founder and CEO of Neutral.ai, which is an AI-native sustainability platform that helps enterprises actually act on climate data and not just report it. Backed by IIM Bangalore, Stanford Seed, and NASSCOM, he is building AI workflows for one of the most regulation-heavy, data-heavy sectors in the world. Avi, welcome to Point Break. And of course, my second guest today is Abhinav Sherwal, who is the co-founder of Recur Club, India's AI-led debt marketplace that has deployed over rupees 3,000 crore across 2,000 plus companies, helping founders raise non-dilutive capital in as fast as 48 hours. His platform, in fact, uses a proprietary AI credit engine that analyzes businesses across 200 plus parameters in real time. He, in fact, also raised $50 million in Series A earlier this year. Abhinav, an absolute pleasure to have you here as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on Point Break.
Thank you, Antara.
It's a pleasure. I'll just start with a very, very simple question. Both of you are building with artificial intelligence every day. So, an honest answer, what are you actually celebrating today? What has AI done for your business that genuinely surprised you?
Sure, I can start. Then you can pitch in.
Yes, please.
Right? Sure.
I'll just give an example. So when we started, the core problem which we identified in the financial institution and lending is that, at least when we talk about business lending, right, it's very different than your personal lending where there's a bureau score and it's much easier to underwrite. Businesses are much more complex, right? They're much more nuances, a lot of thousands and thousands of document data points. And when we started, it used to take probably weeks to just understand a business, right? And there was no rule-based lending or rule-based things which could have solved this problem. And over the past 5 years, we have completely seen a shift in how we are approaching this as a problem. Something which was impossible 5 years back is technically done in minutes. Like while talking to you, I can underwrite a company on one click, which goes, understands all the thousands of documents. It understands the various things to look after, summarize, and give it to my underwriter. So it has drastically changed not just workflows, but the type of work our employees are doing. So, and it's completely eliminated a lot of roles as well, right? So we see that drastic shift, and this is around how we are harnessing the power of AI. We are not creating, most of us are not creating new foundational models. It's just like we are not creating internet, we're just using and building apps on top of it to deliver actual value. So what we have seen is that AI is so transformational that it just cuts through different processes, different status quos, and actually goes beyond it to deliver something which was undreamable maybe say a few years back. So it's completely changed.
Absolutely, Abhinav. Very rightly said. Avi, you want to add on to that?
Yeah, and very true, Abhinav. But I think, Antara, as you mentioned, we are looking at the business from another angle. We are in a regulatory landscape, which means that when we work with large enterprises in India and abroad, the concern mainly is that our business relies on enterprise trust. And the idea of AI is on the different angle, right? So AI can do a lot of work faster, and also it can, like Abhinav mentioned, eliminate a lot of jobs and workflows that happened in our industry. But what changed in the appreciation day is now AI started becoming, like the model started improving at that level that now we can build the solutions around it. Earlier, like Abhinav mentioned, the idea is whenever we build any kind of workflows, the accuracy or the kind of threshold that our industry wanted, like in our industry, even 95% is not good enough. Right? Because whatever we do actually gets reported in SEBI, other annual reporting forums, and billion-dollar companies are technically relying their annual reports on that kind of data. So the problem here is how can we build with technology? And that is something that has changed in past 3 years. I think you talked about Demis's example of we are closer to AGI. I think recently he mentioned about the same thing. Similarly, what we have started seeing is how to build with human plus AI together. So that's a learning that we had in past 2 years, because what we learned is what kind of job can be given to AI and what we should not give to AI. So in our business, AI is doing heavy lifting. You can say like grunt work or the main data related work is done by AI, but still we have a human expert signing things.
Certainly.
So that's the duality that we see today. Yeah.
Absolutely, Avi. Abhinav and Avi, I think that's a great place to start. Let's get into some harder questions here as well.
Sure.
And let me put a number which should make us pause on AI Appreciation Day. OpenAI says India now has over 100 million weekly ChatGPT users. Anthropic says that India is its second largest market globally. The point that I'm trying to make here is that India is one of the world's biggest consumers of artificial intelligence. But like you were saying, almost every model powering that consumption is built, owned, and monetized somewhere else. Every prompt an Indian user sends, every correction that they make, every workflow that they build, that is learning. And that learning is going back to the model. Avi, my question here is to you. Neutral operates in sustainability, right? A space where data is everything. When your enterprise clients use AI tools built by, say, American or European companies, who actually owns the intelligence being generated from their workflows? Do your clients ever really think about this?
Yeah, and I think, Anta, that's a fair point, because the clients that we work with, as well as our neutral core team, we always think about this entire thing. And I'll start with your first data point that you mentioned, which is 100 million user. I think ChatGPT mentioned this year primarily that we crossed it from India's side. And your point is pertinent. We can think of it in two ways, right? When they are saying 100 million user, they mean that consumption is driven in India. We are not owning that kind of data. We are mainly consuming those services primarily on larger spectrum, right? And second thing is we should club it with another point, which is like what Satya mentioned recently, right? If you look at recently what he mentioned about reverse information paradox, right? Yeah. Where the idea is earlier in services and businesses, service provider used to pay get paid, and in return they used to provide services or give their knowledge IP. Right? Today we are in a dichotomy where we are paying for models and we are only giving them IP from that perspective, right? With the core data. So that's an interesting dichotomy from that perspective. Yeah. But in Indian enterprises, Antra, what we have seen is, and working with enterprise clients, is two things. One is when we look at, let's say, AI sovereignty or having something which is not going out of India. Sovereignty is not just about that Indian enterprises looking at it that don't use frontier technology or don't use frontier intelligence, because that's also a threat if we are not using best of the model. Yeah. So we want to use it, but we want to have an optionality around it. That it's not that our business or anyone's business is relying on a particular model provider. Actually, the value lies in how do you use data, how do you use intelligence. And that's what, Antra, we are building at Neutral. So that we own the workflows, we own the orchestration, we own the looping part. And yes, models will come. And like we were discussing, every 6 months now, models are improving. Yeah. Which means that the underlying technology will become more and more intelligent. Correct. But how to use that will remain in India is something that we are mainly building towards.
All right, Avi. Thank you for answering that with so much clarity. Abhinav, Record Club has built its own AI credit. Abhinav, I'm so sorry. Did I cut you off? I'm so sorry. You wanted to add something?
I'll make my point while I answer your question.
Oh, no, but please do. Please do. My question can wait.
Okay. So the point I was trying to make is that we talk about the context which is going out, how we are using it going out. But if you realize, go maybe a decade back, 2 decades back, this has been the case forever since the information technology age, right? You talk about the top search engines, top social media platforms, your TikTok or Instagram. It's just that they have always been capturing our data. We have now the largest user base. Your Google is always capturing what we search. It's just an extension, a next level of the same intelligence which we have unfortunately been giving to the world, right? And it just technically raises the question that is how those companies became really good at what they do. We were never able to create our own search engine or our own social media platform at that scale, right? Because this data is what gave them competitive advantage to be better, to create better content, curate better feeds. It's just on another level that with this intelligence is going even further, that they will now understand us even more, right? So I would say this trend started maybe 3 decades back. We are just now seeing what is really happening every day and how addicted we are. We just cannot stay without it. Like we can't stay without a Google or a Instagram, right? It's just an extension of that. So it's nothing new, but I know it's good that we are now talking about it, but still we are hostage to it. Even though we are talking about it, we don't have an alternative at that scale, right? We always had an Indian search engine we did not use, an Indian social media platform we did not use. And right now it's Indian, maybe foundational model we are not ready to use because they are not at the best which is available in the world. Right?
All right.
So that's
Absolutely.
I don't know the
Thank
answer, but reality is that this is the world we live in.
No, for sure. I mean, there's one thing is painting a comfortable picture. The other is to paint a hard reality. And that is, I believe, it's a fact of a matter, right? Absolutely. Thank you for adding that, Abhinav. What I was asking you prior to this was, Record Club has built its own AI credit engine rather than just using a general purpose model. Was that a deliberate sovereignty decision or was it purely a, capability one?
So there's 2 parts. I think Avi highly pointed out that in a regulated environment, we have to take certain decisions. So in lending also in India, we are dealing with very sensitive customer data and client data, right? We have all the things in a business, their customers, their bank accounts, all that data. And not everyone can be sent to it's regulated also. And in non-regulated also, it's a conscious choice of whatever we can pass, whichever we can make sense of locally. That is much preferred. There are certain use cases where we still go to the main foundational models, but we try to make sure that we are trying to protect the identity of the data or identity of the customer on which we are trying to do the intelligence. But but eventually if you want to scale this technology, it has to be native. And right now, maybe there is no regulation, but as builder in AI, we realize that regulation can come any day. Right? Tomorrow, maybe RBI says, okay, you cannot send any data, or government of India says you can technically ban a foundational model. So a large business cannot be built on top of this dependence. And that's why that becomes a very important point to build self capabilities or maybe domestic capabilities in the country and leverage that. Maybe it's hard, maybe it's not at that level. But it does make sense to build a long-term business, as we know how geopolitics and how uncertain the environment is. Just to add to that, it's not just only when I talk about internal, so it's not just our government taking calls, it's also foreign governments blocking foundational models, right? Fable 5 was blocked for a month. So they are also taking decisions of not exposing their best of the models. So maybe we are still not there, but very soon it is going to be like a nuclear age, right? Where people who have AGI or who have very close to exceptional models don't want to export it anymore, right? They want to keep it for themselves. And that's where it becomes very important as a country for all of us to start thinking on what can be built here, right? Because that intelligence can just be stopped also at one day.
Fair.
Without
both of you have made really pertinent points on something, and I sort of want to push on that. I want to talk about whether India can really move from being a user to being a builder, right? So the question here is, would you say that a country can become an AI superpower without owning the underlying models and platforms, or would you say it just needs to be brilliant at the application layer?
Not like I can
Yes,
take
please,
that one,
please.
Abhinav. Sure. Yeah. So, Antra, how we look at it, two things, right? So, one thing you mentioned is about sovereignty or building something in India is like the only answer. At least the way we are looking at it, it's not either or. Like right now, we are looking at it that either you build a frontier technology or you become an application layer. There's no middle ground in between, right? In India. And whenever we say India needs to have sovereignty in terms of AI, we always talk about India should build its LLM layers. But actually, it's much deeper. Like what Abhinav is mentioning, what we are discussing in building something in India is at least build the layers in India. So when I say layers, compute is in India or not, data is in India or not, infra, do we have it or not, at all levels, right? And when we say sovereignty, before India as a country, because we have multiple priorities from country perspective also, right? Before sovereignty, we should have optionality. That when Fable 5 type of moment happens, we have an option to subscribe somewhere. We are not hostages to a model. I think that's something that we should build. And that's where China model can be very interesting, because today China might or might not be leader in terms of few AI things, but recently what they have launched in terms of having world model for AI robotics, having GLM-5 or let's say very close to a frontier model, right? That kind of technology is there. So it's not something that we need huge capital to do that. Yes, we are relatively in terms of not a very good hand in terms of capital when it comes to India and building such technologies, but we can still first strive for optionality and then for ultimate sovereignty. That's what I feel.
Okay. All right. Abhinav, anything else that you want to add on to that?
I think absolutely bang on. I mean, we should, and any founder who's also building in the country, I'll say on a very practical level, should build around this optionality, right? Don't be dependent on a model, right? So whenever you are building anything or whenever application, if whatever workflow you're trying to build, build for that optionality that you can either like have no, I'll say, linkage to a model that you can only work on this. So it's just easier to build and easier to scale because tomorrow anything can come and change. And when I talk about, say, building or supporting, I think India has a very different ecosystem as compared to, you can say, China is a very different ecosystem versus the US. And if you read about all the backstories, how different entrepreneurs and different capital has backed OpenAI. It took them 10 years to eventually start making revenue. And they poured through so much dollars, which technically is not available in our country. And you look at the China model where the government has supported them, right? And they have actually come up to what is maybe stay closer. They're just few months maybe apart than US versus us, right? So both of these models are not there yet. So if you look at the government schemes also, they're not at that level to really support and really back builders or support that ecosystem. So that's worrying. And like Avi said, that there are different priorities, obviously. We can't pour in that much amount of money. But at some point in time, it will become a national priority very soon, I believe. Right? Because I compare it always very close to nuclear age. That the moment they realize, okay, this has gone, everyone will rush towards it, and not everyone will have capabilities to be able to do that. Because it will take a lot of money. Right? And once internal models, they close their doors, it's very difficult to replicate. So if you see how China is being able to crack it, because they have access to frontier models. So they're able to still reverse engineer, train, understand their weights. If you don't have access to those models, it's almost impossible to do it in such low cost. Right? That is again another challenge. That once it crosses that bar, it's very difficult to do it in low cost. Then you have to invest, have to work on the uranium and figure it out. You cannot just buy that technology anymore or reverse engineer it for that matter.
Certainly, Abhinav. Thank you for your perspective on that, Abhinav. Record Club, I believe Abhinav is deploying capital based on AI credit analysis across 200 plus parameters, right? Now, that by itself is a real world deployment. My question to you is, what has artificial intelligence actually done for your core business outcomes, and where has it still let you down?
Sure. So there are two things, Antra. So one is when I talk about real business impact, right? All the mundane work. So think of it like 5 years back, if I had to lend to a company, I would collect their KYC document, their bank statements, their GSTs, their audited statement, their MIS, there's 100 list of documents. just to get the data, I'm not even talking about decisioning, just to get the data, it used to take me 14 days, 15 days, just to make sure the entire checklist is complete. In today's world, all this ops, I don't have any ops team which collects data, right? My AI can understand what data is pending. ICA can reach out to the customers directly. It can make a phone call to them. It can understand whenever a data is submitted. So all this manual operations work has completely been, and with a lot of, like with 99.99% accuracy being solved. Now the next part is really understanding, making sense of it. Even though AI can do all of it, there are still, in lending specifically, there are few things which are still not solved. Like think about, if I'm going to lend to you, Antra, I need to understand your personality, how you are as a owner. Are you really committed to doing your business? Say tomorrow I give you 10 crores of loan and you say, okay, I don't want to run this business, or I don't want to return your money. So that trust which comes across the table, the trust which comes across when we talk human to human, is still not solved. So that's why even though we do everything, whatever can be captured, the data, your conversations, I can understand your voice and I can actually be doing that. We actually understand how founders is talking. All of this data has been solved, but that gut or that trust that you earn across the table is still not solved by AI. So that's that 10% which is left for me, and which is actually the most important part right now. Right. So now, say an underwriter is actually being paid for that 10% to sit across the table and understand, okay, will this person do what he's saying he will do? Right. So that is still left. And I think most of the things has been solved, but obviously there are certain inefficiencies at times. People don't leverage it fully. So there's, I think, in most of the enterprises, that adoption is a challenge. Right. I can do underwriting in 1 minute, but still people would want to do their models. I can get data, but at times they will still want to check if the data has come in. Right. So these kind of inefficiencies are there, which I think is more, it's almost like when email would have come in, you would have checked, okay, email aaya kya? Right. But at one point in time, when you press the button, it will go. So we are at that pivot. After some time, people will start trusting, believing those workflows when the trust is in the system. But still, I think in few cases like us, that 10% of humanness is still not solved. I'm hopeful it will be solved, but right now it is not solved.
All right, Abhinav. Thank you for that very honest and candid answer there. Avi, the next question is to you here. Neutral's whole pitch is that, ESG tools are built for reporting and not action. And you are building for action. Is AI, actually delivering that in practice? Or would you say there is still a gap between what AI promises for sustainability workflows and what it delivers when you really get inside a real enterprise?
No, and I think, Antra, that's a very good question. And I think what we have learned on the entire spectrum is the point of view of where AI brings in efficiencies and where AI should not lead, but human should lead, right? So that distinction is very important for us. What we call it internally is building AI systems around it. And just to give you, Antra, one example around the same is, let's say whenever a workflow or whenever any kind of action-oriented work is done in sustainability, or even reporting work is done in sustainability, the thing is that 80 to 90% of things, that data-related work, what Abhinav was also mentioning, right, can be automated by AI. But now what we have started seeing is that earlier, 1 year ago, AI was just a chatbot, which means that human is guiding the conversation and then chat is answering. Now we have launched something which is much more agentic, which means that 90% of time it can complete the entire action. It's not just chatting with you. But the problem is that brings us some kind of efficiencies within the company and enterprises. To give you a real example, like when we do any kind of case studies, we learn that at least one workday is something that we can save off an auditor within every department and team. But the idea is, in that one workday, what other that human can do, right? Which will be at expertise level. Because just saving the day and then not having collaborative work is also wasteful for the company, right? So the idea here is that, like Abhinav mentioned, the idea should be that we design system in such a way that AI does the job which AI is good at, human does the job which human is good at, but the kind of UX or the kind of experiences where AI and human can collaborate in real time is something that where we are innovating. So the idea of agent is that it keeps running. Think of it like having a compliance officer, which is 24/7 available to you, but it only messages or WhatsApp you when something is really high alert, right? So it resolves the low ticket item very fast. So that's a vision that we are working towards in technology.
Fantastic, Avi. Thank you so much for answering that. I want to push on one specific thing here. And again, this is a question to both of you. Artificial intelligence is, often said to be great at the first 80 to 90% of a task, but then it later on struggles with the final stretch. Again, like you were pointing out, where judgment or accountability or domain expertise matters the most. Would you say that is your experience, and also is that last mile actually AI's biggest unsolved problem right now as we speak?
I think sorry, Abhinav, can I take it?
Sure.
Yeah. So, Antra, in your example, you're correct that first 90% of work that AI can solve it. And then other 10% which is left is not something which is junior level or even early stage people's skill set can solve it, right? It's actually human judgment work, which is typically happening because data is messy. The information is not there in the workflow that we are capturing, right? So even if a good, let's say mid skill set person is sitting in room, will still struggle to answer that question where AI is right now struggling, right? So it's a real challenge that human judgment is needed. But think of it from another angle also, that let's say human judgment level that we are trying to solve for other 10%. The idea should be that at least what I have tested in the recent evaluations is model is now good enough to understand that this is the job that model should not do. And that is a breakthrough that I really feel which has now started happening in the frontier model, where it's no longer a black box. If you are designing good systems around it and good harnesses around it, it can actually flag that this does not have certain level of confidence threshold and it should go to a human domain expert. And I think that's where the real value lies, that we leverage the human domain expert where it's needed, not on everything.
Okay, so you're saying that line needs to be there.
Correct. That line needs to be there. Because 100% autonomous as a vision is not in our sector, which is realized well. To give you a very real example, Antra, how any model will not be able to sign on a regulatory report, right? So there, somebody needs to take an accountability of what is given out, right? So no matter how expensive model we use, we need a sign to be there. And I think that also points to one question that you were mentioning. I'll just highlight one thing. See, you mentioned also about pilot to production on any project, right? What we learned in our deployment is whenever we build system in such a way that model does the heavy lifting, but a human expert is signing the output. That's where the production moves faster. But if you design the pilot in such a way that AI will do 100% autonomous things, then it will only be in POC loop and it will never go to productionized version. That's what we have learned in POC to production.
All right, Avi. Thank you for that. Abhinav, do you agree with what Avi says, or do you think that is still an AI problem, quote unquote problem?
Absolutely. So the example I mentioned is where it fails, that maybe the 10% human ownership is required. And Avi really mentioned that it's also about accountability, right? AI is doing a work. Is it accountability of someone who's using it or someone who has made it? It's the same place we keep asking Elon Musk, right? When your car crashes on autopilot, is it your mistake or it's someone who put it on autopilot whose mistake? So that's very clear, right? So we need someone to be accountable. Otherwise, you cannot just let it be. But what we see in real world is in most of the use cases, Antra, if we do it right, if we do the harness right, you can extract a lot more. It's no longer a 80-90% job. It's almost there. For 90% use cases, I would say it's 100% there, right? And it's moving faster. So if you really think AI is the worst it can ever be, is today. Tomorrow it's going to be better. Day after day, tomorrow it's going to be even better. So it's getting better and better. But the question will be only accountability. Someone will have to own, be it compliance, be it any real world impact. Someone will have to be accountable. That's what the role of human is. That use it wisely, design the harness. But we're covering that pace very fast. Right?
Walk with it instead of behind it.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much for that. Let's also quickly go on to the next big question, which of course is AGI. And let me go back to what Hassabis said, right? Demis Hassabis didn't just say that AGI is coming. He said that it could be here in it's just a few years away. And he said that industry may be advancing faster than our ability to really understand, govern, and secure what we are building. So, Avi, my question here is to you. As someone building with AI in a domain that, affects real climate outcomes, do you think about AGI as a practical near-term reality, or would you say that it still sort of feels distant from what you are actually building with today?
Antara, like the point that you're mentioning, right? The article that you're mentioning in terms of Demis, what he has written. So just thinking from that perspective, AGI is mainly understood in 2 points. One is the actual physical reality and reaching singularity. And then the second interpretation is on the technology side, right? Today, because of this forum, I'll just talk about technology side of AGI. On that particular part, what everyone is thinking about it is what kind of repercussions will happen, specifically on cybersecurity, the systems that we have designed around it, right? So it has the potential to do Y2K type of crisis if we are not handling it correctly, right? So there the concern is really valid in terms of escalating it. But AGI is near term or not, the signals currently is mentioning that it's near than how we are thinking about it, right? Because whatever we are seeing in the public forum is still a consumer grade models. And something that everyone is using, right? So when you have access to technology, obviously, we have much more things to be done, like the breakthroughs which are happening in health tech, the breakthroughs which are happening in drug discovery. All these things indicate that we are much closer to it than we are thinking about it. So that remains one thing. But AGI's impact is something that we should all work towards, because I think that's what all the leaders are talking about, that data or technology is there from AGI perspective. Now, what will be the repercussions of it? Specifically in cybersecurity, it will start with. Second, in domains like us, wherever we have a real world impact, let's say in sustainability or climate from other perspective, or let's say even from action perspective, right, at compliance level. The approach of AGI is that we need to rethink entire workforce, because now it's no longer that a person with chatbot or a person with LLM is doing things. The idea is that the person's role is getting replaced by another entity. And we have still not thought over or designed our enterprises systems around it, right? Like Antara, you mentioned that enterprises have recently started adopting technology.
Yes.
So again, adoption of AGI is a bigger problem, because AGI has much to offer, technology has much to offer, but at enterprises, can they at the pace of it adopt it or not? And if they can't, we need to resort to regulatory boundaries, like Fable getting stopped, US government banning few things, Indian government banning few things, right? Because the industry is not ready to absorb it that faster. So I think that's what we feel, that in such domains, AGI or technology promises there, but can we adopt it on?
All right, Avi. All right. Let's also talk about sovereignty here. I'll pivot the conversation here slightly, because I believe sovereignty is what is, at the end of the day, is connecting everything. India has committed over rupees 10,300 crore to the India AI mission, right? Sarvam AI, Bharat Gen, and others are building domestic models as we speak. Now, the government is talking about sovereign AI, but most enterprise AI spending in India still flows to like we were talking about it, right? To OpenAI, to Anthropic, and to Google. Abhinav, the question is to you here. Record Club just raised $50 million and is deploying it partly into AI infrastructure. So first of all, congratulations on that. And also, as a fintech operating in a regulated sector, would you say that AI sovereignty actually matters to you operationally, or would you say that it's a policy conversation that doesn't really change what you build with tomorrow morning?
No, I think it's not just a matter of someone who's operating in a regulatory space, but everyone. Like we mentioned, we discussed about that tomorrow any decision can be taken and you can lose access to certain models, right? And when I talk about probably global politics, it's even more important topic to be able to have sovereignty in terms of foundational model. I think India we are already behind. We need to we want our founders and our innovators to start thinking and the ecosystem to start supporting, right? And the capital, the venture capital money to flow in, government, whatever can be done. Time is now, right? To be able to do that. And when we talk about the real world use cases, we are starting to see that shift, right? When say, let me give an example. Say half of the phones we are using are iPhone. All the software is made outside, right? So we are technically using a foreign platform, and world is dependent, right? Similarly, we are using foundational model, and we are building more and more use cases, right? Right now, it's still young. Enterprises are starting to evolve it. They're creating workflows around it, and it's the right time, because once that dependence comes in, then it creates that inflection point whenever this model access goes away or anything happens, right? So I believe it's that way, like a national resource to be really considering worth investing as a country, as an ecosystem, that you need to have an access so that we have optionality. We talked about, right? It's okay till the point we have everything, because then at least we are in a competitive environment, right? If you really want to build for the world, we need access to the top models. But that said, we still need, I think, Indian models to be at the same level to be able to at least not be a slave again, right? The new world.
Absolutely, Abhinav. I think that's a very honest answer. Avi, does it matter differently when you are dealing with the climate data that crosses borders?
No, in our case also, like majority of enterprises that we work with, sovereignty is something that we take very seriously in terms of data, right? Because although we are working in climate, but it also touches compliance. And compliance data means that you have real data about plants operation, which is flowing in the entire operational workflows, right? That means it's not sensitive from financial or regulatory perspective that much, but it's sensitive from company's IP perspective. Because these large enterprises have built this kind of data over years. And I think that is something that matters a lot to companies, that the way they define, let's say, formulation, or the way a chemical plant runs, or a way a petrochemical refinery runs, like these kind of know-hows is something very important and close to companies. And that's where how we are building neutral around it is the same point that I was mentioning earlier, optionality, right? So we can deliver to enterprises if they want to go completely sovereign, and if they want to learn, let's say, deploy their own open source model, system can run on top of that, plus it can run on the frontier model. But we, as a company, design choice we have taken is we don't want to be behind in terms of the frontier intelligence race. So the idea is not that we'll use XYZ model because it's good for that company or it's good for that geography. The idea should be that we'll use the best of the model possible. And that should be the case any time around, right? So the idea of neutral is also not that please buy the technology because it's made in India. We should buy it because it's made in India is true, but it's best in the global world, right? So that should be the ambition that we should point towards, You
put that out very, very beautifully, Avi. Absolutely. And, let's also end on the biggest picture here. And of course, since we are running short of time here, I would like to wrap the segment. But before that, I want to talk about this. For the past 3 years, AI progress has been measured by co-pilots, by chatbots, benchmark scores. But some of the most consequential breakthroughs may be happening far from the chat window, right? World models that simulate physical environments, AI systems that can, predict protein structures and can design new drugs, robotics that learn from the physical world, climate modeling, of course, at scales human cannot compute. So, Avi, again, you are building AI for climate, one of the most complex, data-heavy, multivariable challenges on the planet. Do you think that the next decade of AI breakthroughs happens in language models or in AI applied to science, biology, climate, and physical systems?
So I think, Antara, what you mentioned is really true, because see, two things, like one is about enterprise data, and that entire wave we have seen in the past 1.5 year, that it was the easy, like in Pareto, is the easy use cases that we have picked and we have solved for. I think now everyone will agree that coding now is superhuman compared to any coder. Like at least on the median side, it has crossed that threshold and boundary. Similar thing will happen in world models. And that is what we have started seeing. If you look at the recent advancement, right? China is now saying that 1 million humanoid will try to deploy in the technology side, right? And again, India or emerging market has become the data labeler role, right? So here data is getting trained on the entire robotics side, right? So the role is there. We believe that world model will even give larger breakthrough than LLM or chat is currently giving. And that is the age that we'll see in the next 2-3 years, where the robotics combined with world model will again give new advancement. And that's where I think everything connects, that we need something which solves for intelligence. I think the industry has now evolved to a certain point that intelligence is more or less now companies have solved for. Next will be how can we go to physical world? And that's where a larger breakthrough will happen. And we are still seeing some glimpse of it around the world. Yeah.
Absolutely, Avi. Thank you for that. Abhinav, the question to you is this. Record Club is building India's debt infrastructure with AI. So 5 years from now, do you think AI will be remembered primarily as a productivity revolution or as a technology that forced companies to fundamentally rethink how they make decisions?
Yeah, I think not sure if we'll call it remembered, because it will be still there all around us. So we'll witness it every day. But good point, right? When we talk about, and we are still a small company, at our scale also we see that we have to fundamentally rethink how we approach certain things. It's not just, so first step was trying to automate what we do, trying to replicate what humans do, the processes we have created. But what we have seen now over the past 1 year, it has been completely rethinking those processes, which were fundamentally not possible before. And that is what we believe, at least the next immediate phase, while we are seeing foundational models improve, is completely like companies completely rethinking how they operate, right? How they run their operations, how humans are employed. And that is why a lot of workflows will technically change their hat. Your ops person might be doing something else. So a lot of restructuring will happen at a macro level, I believe, because of AI. Because a lot of knowledge work, a lot of mundane work is technically automated, right? And everyone will realize it. So after, I think in 5 years, the way humans would be employed or organization and the work of human hours put in would be completely different than what it is today.
Okay, so you're predicting a diametrical shift there.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Abhinav, thank you for that. One final question before I let the two of you go. Hassabis argued that AI could deliver an impact 10 times the Industrial Revolution at 10 times the speed. Do you believe that future historians would look back at this particular moment as a productivity technology, or as the civilization scale shift, comparable to electricity or fire?
Yeah, definitely. Like even more than that, I would believe, Antra. Right? It's something which we have not witnessed till date. Right? It's multifold in that impact, and it's happening much faster. Think of it like this: it's like 3-4 years back, we did not even know what AI is, and now everyone is using it. Everyone is trying it, and you'll be surprised. Even like it's real. Your rickshawala to your guard, everyone is using AI.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The penetration of this is humongous. It's not like electricity at all, or any other internet, or whatever revolution we would want to talk about. So it's on another level. And like we talked about, it's not 10x, it's 10 to the power 10.
Okay. All right, Abhinav.
I think fundamentally, Antra, it will be bigger because of two reasons. Like one reason is that the civilization till today was mainly around scarcity, right? We don't have enough knowledge. We don't have enough intelligence, the same thing, right? Because of AI now, we are no longer in the scarcity era, right? It's an age of abundance on everything when you talk about, right? So like as a civilization, we have never thought about that. How would that non-scarcity or post-scarcity will look like. So I think that will be much bigger than whatever we have seen till now, like no longer an internet or 10x productivity thing, but it will be bigger than that. And second thing is, like, we also need to think our society structure around it, right? So till now, everyone's role in society was that we are providing some intelligence or providing some knowledge work. Like there was a term called knowledge worker, right? Which we all are primarily doing, right? So now the fundamentals are being challenged. So from that perspective, at least we believe that the shift will be much bigger than what we have seen till now. And I agree with that point that it will be like more than an electricity being discovered again or a wheel discovery again. Yeah.
All right. One more question, Avi. I was listening to you and I just thought of this. One thing, AI has not been able to maybe do for your business yet. And something, actually, this is for both of you, something that you genuinely wish that it could do, but it couldn't. But since AI is on such a fast track already, you are sort of, predicting that it might be able to do in the future, but hasn't been able to do it until now.
I think, Andhra, human trust. I feel like majority of business, although we all talk about numbers. It's we all talk about numbers, money, time saving, all these things. But technically, if you look at it, the entire trade, geopolitics, money, currency, all relies on trust, right? Primarily. So trust is something which is still not solved. It was what I feel, and that's the last 5-10% that we all are looking at. If we can design the system in such a way that AI system and human system together is giving some kind of trust behaviors, like emergent trust behaviors, that will be an interesting time to live in. Yeah,
certainly, Avi. Would you still argue then that that fine line has to be there even then?
Yeah, I think always, Andhra, it should be there, because fine line is not, it's about trust and accountability, right? From that perspective. So no matter what we do, accountability is something that will have to be there. But I'm optimist, like as founders, we all are optimists from that perspective, right? So technology will evolve and we'll see larger pieces of pie to be given to AI. And there we can see a lot of gains. But still, I feel that designing system around enterprise trust or human trust will be like giving a lot more rewards compared with just working on the productivity side. Yeah.
All right. Abhinav, anything?
I believe that we talked a lot about it, that true AGI would be when we can technically put accountability on AI. So I'm really hopeful when that happens, when I can really question a foundational model or whatever that similarity is, and we can easily put them accountable, trial them in court, fire them from jobs. That is where the true revolution will happen. Right now, that's the problem, right? The accountability lies on someone using it. I cannot go in a meeting and say it's Claude's fault, not mine. So when that starts to happen and Claude had to defend itself, that is when we say we have reached there. That they're accountable for what they're putting out. They're actually arguing with you, okay, this is right. And they have an opinion. So that accountability, I think when it comes, it would be game changer for all of us.
All right. And since it's all about AI appreciation day to day, the first question that I asked, and when I was introducing you guys, and I was just giving the introduction to the show, I asked this, that should we be celebrating AI or should we be using this as a moment to really ask if we are deploying it wisely? So I think I would say, based on the conversation that I've had with the two of you, I think it would be the latter. I think it's safe to say that.
Yes, definitely. I was just talking to someone yesterday and I told them I'm reading more than I did for my IIT preparation that I've read in the last 1 year. Because there's so much development happening, and we're always, as founders, just trying to stay on top of models, trying to stay on a lot of new use cases. There is a lot of sleepless night, but it's a lot of exciting time also, right?
Absolutely.
It's just like a tectonic shift.
Absolutely, but so true. So true. There's so much to read. Avi, you were saying something. Yeah.
No, I think very true. I think, Antra, for us also, whatever we are looking at, like in terms of technology and being shifted from that perspective, I feel that the times are different. And like Abhinav is mentioning, things are getting, like advancements are so fast from company perspective as well as from domain perspective that we are rethinking the entire workflows, everything, all systems actually. at levels. And what we can on the appreciation day, what we should actually do is stop and ponder in terms of what can be the good way to deploy this, right? Because see, what's happening is it's not every 6 months, it's not that chatbots are improving. Actually, the use cases are different. If you actually look at it, prompt engineering was a job and it stayed for 2 years. Now, if you look at it, prompt engineering is no longer a job, right? We all started talking about loops and designing systems in different ways. So even things are moving so fast that it's not a better way that's coming. It's actually new things coming every 3 months. So that's where I think pausing and then thinking towards it will give us better results. Yeah.
Absolutely. Avi and Abhinav, thank you so much. Thank you to the both of you. Thank you for your time. This has been invigorating. This has been educational. And of course, it's been also very, very honest. So thank you for that. And ladies and gentlemen, whoever has tuned in right now, AI Appreciation Day is a good prompt, yes. But not just to celebrate what AI has done, but to really ask honestly whether we are deploying it wisely or who captures the value it creates and whether the speed at which we are moving matches our ability to sort of understand what we are building in the first place. So those are uncomfortable questions, yes, but they're also the right ones. So thank you for tuning in, viewers. I am Antara. This is Point Break, and we will see you again next episode.